Welcome to the Humanizing Work show. In today's episode, Richard and I chat with Vivian Rhoads, president of the Women's Health Business Unit at Pharmavite, the maker of nature-made vitamins and many other vitamins and supplements. Vivian has a long and successful career in the consumer packaged goods industry, with stints at Mars and PepsiCo, as well as doing consulting for several years with startups in that space. I first met Vivian at one of our public courses, a leading organizational transformation class in San Diego about 4 years ago. At the time, Vivian had just accepted a new role at Pharmavite as their Vice President of Innovation, where she had a mandate to take Pharmavite from an established leader in more traditional vitamins and supplements to being an innovation leader in that space. In the 4 years since that workshop, Richard and I have worked with Vivian and her teams and several others at Pharmavite, and it's been a pleasure to watch her lead with heart and purpose, as well as to see her absolutely knock it out of the park with her mandate to bring innovation into the company. Our conversation is wide-ranging, covering tons of great topics. In fact, as I edited the episode, I kept a list of my favorite points, and there are 20 of them. I'm actually going to read them off real quick because I think it'll give you an idea of what to expect in this episode. So, first, we talk about how she first discovered Agile and why that turned out to be really important in her new position leading innovation. Second, she had a starting hypothesis for what roles were important to have on that first innovation team at Pharmavite, and we talk about how that went. We talk about how she approached hiring for what she describes as unicorns that are comfortable with loose role definitions and looking for purpose in their work beyond personal achievement. How she introduced Agile to a CPG company where it had never been used while not being too preachy about it. The results of her team effort, including accelerating from no new innovation in over a year to 25 innovations per year, and decreasing the lead time from an average of about 21 months between new products to their current lead time of 4 to 9 months. How using a human-centric design thinking approach and a balanced innovation portfolio increased not only that speed and quantity of innovation, but the quality of it as well, leading to innovation representing a huge part of Pharmavite's growth, 39%, even as the pandemic created a massive demand for their traditional vitamins and supplements. How she worked to reframe failure as learning, both for the organization and for individuals. How her innovation team balanced the need for transparency in what they were testing and learning with the risk of overwhelming the rest of the business with what could feel to an outsider of the team like lots of chaotic churn. We talk about the benefits she saw from bringing a designer into the team from the very beginning, leading to more T-shaped team members, which we discuss in the episode, and eventually everyone on the team, regardless of their role, doing things like conducting user interviews in consumer homes, testing ideas on the website, and building and testing what she called protoceps, which was a new concept to us, so we also learned what a protocept is. Vivian shares how a cross-functional team that included both consumer insights and science and technology was the right match to lead to breakthrough innovations that served Pharmavite's purpose to bring the gift of health to life. How her CPG innovation teams are similar and how they might differ from traditional software Scrum teams. We discuss how she balances the benefit of autonomous teams with the need to collaborate and share information across those teams. We then go into how Vivian has grown as a leader, including how mindfulness practice, focusing on abundance, sharing vulnerability, and her efforts at mentoring and developing have been life-changing for her and her team. We touch on how the leadership circle model provided deep insights for her on how to approach her new role as she transitioned from Vice President of Innovation to President of the Women's Health Business Unit. We discuss the importance of starting that new role with building relationships, learning the existing culture, and co-creating a vision for the organization when she took on that role, versus the all-too-common approach of coming in on day one and telling everybody the new way things are going to be. We talked about what she hoped work will look like a generation from now. She shares a great technique she used to facilitate an inclusive, focused conversation with that new team in the first week about what was changing, how people were feeling about it, what they needed from her, and what everyone's expectations were as she stepped into the new role. She also shares her experience growing up outside of Sao Paulo, Brazil, in a family of entrepreneurs, and how at the time she felt like there was something that needed to be fixed about her presence, her ambition, and her drive to achieve, and how working with an exemplary leader later in her career became the model for how she could make other people around her better by shifting that view of herself. and how on the first day of the new job in San Diego, she experienced an almost cosmic full circle experience that helped her reflect on everything that's happened over the last 4 years. Richard and I are super grateful for Vivian's leadership and generosity in sharing these experiences and what she's learned, and we hope you'll get as much out of the conversation as we did. We would love it if you're interested in hearing more conversations like these, as well as the key concepts that Richard and I are learning and finding helpful to our clients, if you would subscribe to the show, rate it in your podcast app, and share it with others. Okay, on to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed as much as we did.
Vivian, welcome to the Humanizing Work show.
Thank you.
You've done some impressive things applying Agile software development way outside of software in the CPG, consumer product goods space. Tell us about how that happened.
When working with entrepreneurs, I needed to get a lot done in a very short time frame because budgets were different, right? So I was doing marketing strategy and innovation strategy. And so I came across the concept of sprints. And from the Google Ventures book, Sprint, and really got fascinated with that idea of a kind of a structured, focused team approach. And went into really a spiral of learning about lean startup, Scrum, what design thinking is, and started kind of that exploration, but really knew there was something about it, which is the power of small teams against a very focused goal, and people who care about the purpose. So I started exploring that, and when I started interviewing actually for Pharmavite and heard from our CEO the purpose of transforming and the need to transform innovation and tapped into me for that, I knew that I needed to draw upon my corporate experience with PepsiCo and Mars, but a lot of the 5 years that I spent working with entrepreneurs in designing something that was small, nimble, based on test and learn. So I had a conviction of that, but didn't quite know what it was. So I got a hold of a book, Age of Agile, and started learning a lot about it, but didn't know how to get started. Like, okay, who do I select to be in that team? Like, how do I go about the process? How do I go about the process to start? So I went and Googled, like, Agile training near me, and came across the course that Peter was teaching for certified Agile leadership. And it was like a week and a half away. And I'm like, you know, I need to go talk to someone. That seems like a good investment for me to take the train down there and learn. And through that training, I found a connection with a lot of the concepts that I've been personally developing about leadership, about purpose-driven organization, human-driven organization, gave me case studies, right? It still didn't give me like who should be on your team, but gave me at least a lot of kind of the big vision how to do it. And I, you know, at the time, also went to a Lean Startup conference, which gave me other, you know, methods about how do you test and learn, and started, you know, that exploration. But the really funny thing is that when I was coming back from the Lean Startup conference, so I think I met you in September, and the conference was in November, and I came back, met my brother who was coming from an IT conference, he's in IT, and met at LAX, and he was going to spend a couple days here. And I said, like, you won't believe, I've just discovered this thing, and you won't believe it comes from software. It's Agile. He said, Vivian, I've been a product owner for the last 7 years of my life. And I'm like, why did I never talk about this, right? And it was really funny, but I understood, when I understood the principles and the values of Agile, like, you know what, let's take a stab at that.
You mentioned hiring as a challenge in there, figuring out the composition of your teams. How did you come to think about that as you experimented with what makes the right Agile team in this space?
I started with thinking about a startup, and the startups that I work with, like, who do you have? Like, usually you start, there's a founder, there's someone who has a vision, and then the first hire is an operations person. Okay, I need an operations person. What else do I need? I do need a marketer that's going to set some of the vision strategy. We're a human-centric, consumer-centric organization. I do need consumer insights into it. Science is huge from a product development and science. Okay, I need a scientist in that. And I would say the biggest hypothesis that came a lot from design thinking is bringing a designer to the very beginning of the discovery of innovation. So that was the wild card of the team. But I knew that we had to have a cross-functional team that could operate independently from the machine and could still know enough to get stuff done independently. Progress. So that was the beginning of the structure, and that was the very first team. And as we expanded into other pods, other teams, the makeup, could change a little bit depending on the purpose and the vision that you had.
What was challenging about being this island of an Agile way of working in the middle of a large organization that doesn't work that way?
I think the hardest thing, first of all, is in recruiting. The type of profile and people that you need is different. The roles and responsibilities are not very well defined on purpose. There's overlap between people. You have to build some of that redundancy within the team. And you are I was looking for unicorns. And I didn't know I was looking for that, but I started seeing a pattern of people who came to the realization in life that there's more than achievement. There's a sense of discovery, a personal aha moment that happened that made me feel I want to work with purpose. I want to work in a team that I care about and they care about me. I don't want just a title. I don't want just progression. I want to feel great about what I'm doing. And this is difficult to pin and put in a job description that's what you're looking for. And certainly it's like, yeah, this person has the qualification, but I haven't seen that thing. And so recruiting is that, and I would say that I take longer to recruit than most.
Well, and if
because
you put
of that.
If you put that in the job description, you're not likely to find somebody who reads that and says, "Nah, I don't want purpose in my work. That's not for me."
Exactly.
So it's really easy for people to say yes to.
Yes, exactly. I want to work in health and wellness.
Of course I want that.
It's great, and a team that cares, sure. But it's through the behaviors and through conversation. I like the level questions, and we do complete integration of the team as part of the recruitment process, which is also another one, especially in the age nowadays, in this market that exists, the speed of recruitment is very important. So you don't want to have like rounds and rounds and rounds, but at the same time, I do want to make sure that the people meet the team and the team get to meet the person. So that's another thing. So there's just one part, but the major part is a lot of technicalities that we come across in Agile, like what's a backlog, what's a sprint, what's the role of a sprint review and a retrospective. When the organization doesn't have the language around it, it can sound cultish. And so how do you make sure that you are approachable, right? That you're not it's the organ rejection type of situation, right? You want to be different, but you don't want to be rejected for it. So building those bridges are difficult. But once you start seeing results, and there are different ways of achieving results, right? We have one way of achieving, other teams have different ways of achieving. What can we learn from each other? Great, but I'm not trying to preach to anybody that that's the only way of working. And so that's kind of a fine line of being proud about what you do and the results and how you're achieving, but not sounding, preachy and know-it-all type of situation. So that's challenging because I'm really proud, I'm passionate, but I don't want to be perceived as being, the one that has the answer.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned earlier that you were brought in with a specific charter, a specific goal. Tell us a little bit about what was your charter, what was your mandate when you were brought into Pharmavite? And then you mentioned that results start to shift people's willingness to pay attention to what you're up to. So maybe you can just give us a little bit of that arc, like what was the original? How did it go? Where are you at right now with that?
Yes. So it all began from the fact of Pharmavite and NatureMade as the big legacy brand in the industry. NatureMade was one of the ones, that's celebrating now 51 years, but really it started the beginning of supplementation. And it has had great success over the years, but with that, it created, I would say, a steady state culture. And when Jeff came about, it's grounding on purpose and grounding in values. Part of the observation is that we haven't been able to innovate and have meaningful innovation. There were some innovation initiatives, but often they would hit the market and fail right away. And there was a lot of focus on renovation, just making sure the business is steady, but in a category where really innovation is the name of the game, you have to change. So the need for change was there. So what I had to do is to figure out, how we're going to innovate to drive growth for the organization, right? The goal is growth. So when looking at that, I found that there were a lot of well-intentioned people that tried to do innovation. It was, great talent that tried to do it. But what I saw is that the systems of work were not there. Systems of work and organizing people and how to make decisions, those are super, super important. And so when I came here, an important part of it all was to identify the team, build the culture of the team, but also build the governance that would propel transformation and not just justifying to the leadership team, consumer test results using traditional methods, but rather using a test and learn approach. Real people, real consumers, people who spend time in their homes that we would build the intuition to do. But the goal was, at the time that I arrived here, there was a national sales meeting. So the national sales meeting happens around June, July, and that's when we announced innovation. And I started second week of July, 4 years ago, 2 weeks after national sales meeting, and no innovation was announced in that sales meeting, which it's puzzling. So that need to change. But I started here in 2018, and I remember my charter was, okay, you're gonna focus on 2021 and beyond. And I said, great, what's the pipeline of 1920? We have none. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna hold any job if I start working 3 years from now and we have none. So literally in 4 months, we dug, things that R&D was working on, things that we just could, put together. And in that year, just 5 months later, we launched 4 pieces of innovation. And then from 0, 1 to 4, then we picked up the pace. Now we're in the 25 range per year. At the time I arrived, 21 months were like from idea to shelf. And by the time you get to shelf, the category has changed. The things were great ideas, except that you're late. So we cut that off significantly. And the shortest that we did, we actually launched innovation in 4 months. Usually it's 9 months is the time. But then we know when we need to pull, we can. We have the confidence that we can do it.
You've talked about this astounding increase in the quantity of innovation that you're able to produce now. Tell us about how the quality of innovation has changed during that time.
Using a human-centric design and design thinking has been critical for us to understand really the needs, and using jobs to be done as a framework for that, to really understand what consumers are going through, the progress they're trying to make, and what are all the substitutes around, right, or the workarounds. This has been critical for us to understand and develop more holistic innovation rather than just, what's the, next, vitamin D. So that happened. But what we also realized is that winning in the marketplace in innovation is about taking a portfolio approach. You don't know exactly how an innovation is going to perform until you hit the market, right? The market situation circumstances might be very different. So how do you take a portfolio approach? So yes, we need to have the holistic, amazing, that we're proud that is first to market, but we also need the next strength of vitamin D, because them together will balance out and you become net positive. It's creating your optionalities. And for the ones that do well, then you build next year, right? But you are constantly learning in the market. What I'm super proud is that in the last year, innovation was responsible for 39% of the growth of Pharmavite. In times of ultra incredible growth behind the pandemic. Certainly, COVID and the pandemic made people think about health differently, and proactive health is super important. So the supplement industry has experienced really good growth. When you look at that and you're able to still contribute, it's not only the pandemic buy, it's really innovation that drove 29% and of the growth, and a huge part of the size of the organization. It's pretty amazing.
I'm curious how the perception of failure or falsification of a hypothesis has changed as you've increased the frequency and decreased the cycle time on innovation.
Yes. Yeah, so what we learned by speeding things up is that there are certain activities that absolutely must happen, right? We will never compromise in quality and safety. However, there are a lot of other things that are questionable where you need it. So looking into a tool that I absolutely love ultimately is, what's the biggest unknown from known to unknown, and high importance to low importance, high impact to low impact, and really look into, those things that you do not know and, cause the biggest impact. So there are ways that this transform the organization. One, from a discovery of innovation, which is where Incubate and my team have focused on. It required, what I say, a reprogramming of our brains, because it's not complicated to the fact that there's an order. So you don't start with a situational analysis. You're going to jump right away in the highest risk hypothesis. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. So everybody that joined the team, that's the biggest thing that I tell in interviews, and I try to probe in interview. Are you able of letting go? Letting go on what made you successful until today. But also from the commercialization team, the people are really, once the business canvas is complete, the people who are taking it to market, that we started doing an exercise of the highest risk hypothesis and questioning parts of the timeline to see are they really needed or things that need to be reframed. So what that means is that it's reframing from failure, right, to learning, and ensuring that every opportunity that you have to reinforce that message and send signals to the organization and how important that learning is what matters. So we spend quite a bit of time and energy to make sure that within our leaders, when they're talking about examples of things that have failed, are how important and how we now, hindsight 2020, you could have done differently, but that was the right action at the time. And so that's really important to send that message to the organization. But ultimately, I do think that failure is a reframe that each person needs to get used to know that, yeah, there might be some cases that it was something that was in your control and you chose something that didn't go the way you wanted, and you be able to live with that. Because I find that sometimes it's not even the organization, it's the person. Can the person live with that discomfort?
So what I'm hearing with how you described the transformation is that before you came here, when we were on this kind of 21, 24-month cycle from we've got an idea to it hits the market, that the organization built out these structures, these processes, like here's the timeline for how we take an idea to market. And they were probably built with a goal of maintain, what did you call it? Not innovate, renovate, right? Like small tweaks. And so you have these blocks of time that have been built in to really allow for safety, stability, everything to be predictable as much as possible. And people are really used to going, step one is this, then step two is that, then step three, et cetera, all the way till we hit market. What I'm hearing you say is that the transformation, or a big part of the transformation, was recognizing that step one might not be where the risk is or where the uncertainty is. And so we need to not worry about step one right now. We're going to go all the way to step 7 because that's where there might be some risk or some uncertainty. And let's just do that piece, because we might get into step 7 and realize, oh no, our hypothesis is wrong. People don't want that, or this is the wrong way to sell it or to market it or to package it or whatever that thing is. And that was really just like uncomfortable for an organization that was very used to going one thing at a time, right, in order. And so a big part of it was getting comfortable with saying, we're going to start in the middle because that's where the risk is. And that allowed you to learn much faster and to start shrinking that timeline. Is that?
Yeah, and it's interesting because we kill so many ideas following that really early on, sometimes there's no visibility of the organization on how many things we don't do. And one day there was some sort of learning shared, and people are like, we don't kill ideas. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, yeah, we don't kill it. And I realized that we're not giving visibility to all the things that got killed completely before we hit the point in which a lot of the organization sees a project. By the time that they see the project, we have desirability validated, feasibility, viability. We're looking for that sweet spot. And until we hit that, there's no need to involve and distract the organization on it. And some subject matter experts help us throughout the way, filling in expertise. But really, a lot like this combination is hard to get. And I thought it was very funny. And like, how can we be more purposeful about showing actually we've done kind of been of the clean out based on the hypotheses that we learned.
It's the risk of being on an island, is that nobody else sees what goes on in the island. And so the way that things work on this island don't spread out, because you're intentionally building some walls around it so that you can do that type of work and move quickly within the bubble of your teams. Now the other teams don't see what's going on in the bubble, and so the ideas don't spread. It's a hard balance there.
It is really, and what I realize is that in this team, there's so many pivots. Pivots are daily. You find an information and you have to rethink that it's a balance on how much transparency you give. Because if you give transparency and you pivot, first of all, it's like, oh, but I thought that that's what you were doing. And I'm like, no, now we're doing this. For people who are not used to that, it feels like uncertain. You don't know what you're doing. You're just changing constantly what you're doing. And so the balance of giving transparency, but also inspiring confidence in the organization that you know what you're doing is a very tricky one, really tricky one. And I don't know that we have it right. We have built ways that we send out to the organization. Our sprints right now are vary between one group, which is on learning, one group has 2-week sprints, the other pod has a 3-week sprint. But every 3 weeks we send to the organization our backlog. Okay, these are the ideas in the hopper with, traffic light, or should you expect, how ready are they, how close are they to finding that sweet spot between desirability, viability, and feasibility. So we do that. It's sometimes confusing, but sometimes you have to accept that there is ambiguity in there, but you have to have some visibility to people, but not too much.
When you were talking about the team structure, you mentioned that bringing design in early was unusual, at least in the industry, right? And you said that was a hypothesis that you should have design in earlier. How did you test the hypothesis? What did you learn?
Yes, the testing of the hypothesis was saying, do we see better thinking coming from the team, novel thinking, innovative thinking from the organization? And what I realized is that by having a designer there are a couple of things. First of all, a lot of cross-training, meaning everybody in the team now knows about design thinking. And that was super important. So be able to carry a user interview. Every single person from supply chain and science and technology person, they carry an interview. They go in homes and they're the ones conducting the interview. So that was great, because I've never seen that before. So it's like getting in, knowing enough, you're not the expert, but you don't need to be the expert for that. So that was like mind changing. And we talk a lot about that concept of the I versus the T, meaning the people within the team, their T's, meaning they have their area of expertise they brought in, but what's important in the T is the breadth, and in finding the people who want that T. And the designer in the team was able to stretch the T of the other people in the team in a way that is unusual, user-centric. So that was fantastic. But ultimately, the other part of design is the doing, being able to prototype things really quickly and be able to, have consumer interviews and have, something to be seen. The designer helping the team a lot to bring things to life and test a website, or test so mock-ups allow us to learn really early on and kill ideas sooner, or find nuggets of insights that we wouldn't otherwise with that. So it's not only approved, now that I'm moving to a different role, a designer's coming with me. I don't know, I can do another way.
Did you say protocept?
Protocept.
That's a new term for me. I got some new lingo. So protocept is this like prototype concept mixed together?
Yes.
Tell me what a protocept is. I've never heard that term.
Prototypes are, I would say, it's in the realm of prototypes, but it is rougher, I guess, even more rough than a prototype. It's, I think what's the magic of design thinking through an artifact, like a protocept is that you find the insight and the need and the driver behind. People are not reacting necessarily to what's in front of them, but what we want to hear is the whys, the perceptions as an artifact, because rarely that thing is the one that makes it to market, but it's a tool for you to learn more about pains, gains, jobs to be done.
Cool.
It strikes me that most people would probably imagine that innovation in the supplement industry is driven by science and technology and that kind of research on the supply end. And everything you're talking about is really understanding the customer and the market.
Yeah, so I think the aha actually came from Toby Cohen, who was in the supplier side of the nutraceuticals company. So he actually, got insights about the industry from the view of, what innovation is looking like. And the aha for him, and he's our chief growth officer, was that nobody was bringing scientific insights and consumer insights at the same time. There are a lot of companies that come from a science perspective, and I say it's beautiful science that solves the needs for 5 people, or have kind of a consumer-centric way, but cannot get to the uniqueness, and frankly, it's not evolving in the science and making things better. So that we live in the intersection of consumer insights and scientific insights. That's the magic. And so what it changed for me, having a CPG background, a lot of food, a lot of beverage that I've developed in the past, was starting with everything at the same time, meaning the scientist is in the room when we're doing ethnographies and we're doing user interviews. And we have, nutrition scientists that are fabulous, that understand the science, but are not necessarily close to the consumer. So bringing those, together have gotten us to come up with novel ways of thinking about solving problems, right? And that's exciting because you're building that bridge. And the amount that I've learned in the 4 years here about science is amazing. And I say, as a non-scientific person, no scientific background, I'm a business person all the way, to be helping to bring the gift of health to life to people in a true way, not just in a marketing positioning way, is amazing. It feels really amazing. It's a team, unification. And that's what really, gets me to be energized about what we do.
Can you share an example of a time when having the scientist in the room while doing the consumer research led to a breakthrough?
Yes, it's a great example is in the area of sleep. So sleep is a key area of focus for us. And we hear over and over again from people who, suffer from bad sleep that, nothing works every day. I try one thing, I try the other thing, open my cupboard, I have, special pillows and sound machines and supplements and lighting and, but nothing seems to work over time. And so there's a high degree of frustration, a high degree of hopelessness and confusion. So we're sitting to that. I'm like, just why? The science, if you look, in melatonin as being like the #1 supplement used for sleep, the science is solid. Like, but why? And the scientist in the room said, hey, but the reason that you don't fall asleep tonight is not the same that you didn't fall asleep last night. Like, hold on, why? It's like, so there's not a one solution. There are different reasons for it. So that was the aha. I'm like, okay, what are the reasons, right? So it got us to do that, and that's how we discovered actually 12 consumer jobs around sleep. Some is because your mind is racing. You can't calm your mind, right? So that's a whole different thing. Some, it's actually that you're waking up in the middle of the night. You have no problem falling asleep, but you're waking up in the middle of the night. So it started kind of opening up a lot of opportunities for us to think about sleep differently and create a portfolio around it, but one that personalization makes sense. So for us, the innovation there is like how to help consumers realize that and navigate an industry or solutions outside of the industry.
So a large portion of our audience comes from some expertise in how Agile software development teams work and kind of traditional Scrum, Agile techniques. And I'm curious, for those listeners, if they were to walk into your team room, now that we're kind of back in person, what would look different about how you use an Agile approach from what kind of a standard Agile approach is like?
Yeah, I think they would have heart palpitations.
Do you have supplements for that?
Exactly. It is very different. So we had to adapt not only to being CPG, not only because it's innovation, we're not like the delivery of software every week, and to our needs, to our head counts, the number of people we have and the job to be done, right? And so what is going to look similar is the fact that we're structured in Scrum teams, that we have the ceremonies, we have daily stand-ups, we have reviews, planning, reviews, retrospectives. That looks the same. We have a product backlog and we have a sprint backlog. Great, until now, great. We also have a working agreement for the team. Awesome. We have stakeholders. Great. Then that's where things get really muddy. So we learned that actually we needed the product owners to sit within the delivery team. So right now, that person wears multiple hats on the product owners. And why did we need to do that? First of all, the unique needs of the team. So to have a master, or some of a product owner that is going across, it was diluted because they're not kind of as close to the work and the fact that things change really quickly. So we saw the benefits of actually having someone sitting there and that's like understands what's happening there to be able to have great backlogs and develop great backlogs. And we also saw that we could not have a flat organization. It came to a time that I had like 15 direct reports or 14 direct reports. And why, you might say, okay, in a self-managing organization, you can manage. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. It could manage a lot more people reporting to me than normal. Than in a regular organization, they usually have a maximum of 5. And, I right now had 8 and it's fine. But there are certain things about coaching and mentoring that you're just not able, there are not enough hours in the day to be able to do that. So within the delivery team, we also have reporting lines. We have seen the benefits that actually the people who are into their development, they feel like their manager is closer. And and then they can set the direction in a faster way. So that I would say that that's the biggest thing. We still have a Scrum Master that goes across the pods. I would say that's the biggest difference.
So you have actually, depending on the timing of it, you have 2 or 3 different teams that are working on innovation, and they focus on kind of different parts of it, and the Scrum Master spans all of those teams.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so rather than having the scrum of scrums, we have the POs that get together and, with the Scrum Master to discuss, because there's some collaboration across the pods. And I would say that that's been the biggest learning has been when the teams were too close, it was hard to understand what team you belong to, and it's something that we really discussed, that you need to be clear on what team you belong to. So then we created more separation, which helped, from an autonomy perspective. But then I think we realized in the last 12 months that it was too siloed, that we need to bring somehow a little bit to have more cross-pollination. We realized that by the external stakeholders. So people we work with, they're like, why does this team or this pod ask me for this information this way, and the other one's asking for the same information but in a different way? Now I'm sitting here trying to I have 2 templates, I have 2 timelines, like it's confusing, right? So we need to have some synergies and bring synergies where it makes sense. Or if there are differences, then we are more able to communicate what the differences are versus just being like, that's how I do it, you know?
Yeah.
How have you grown as a leader over the years?
Yeah, a lot.
Next question. No.
Yeah. So I came in, there are a lot of things that happened in my life prior to coming to here that are good context about who I am and how I came here. When working with entrepreneurs, it came a point of my life that I started realizing that there were people, especially one entrepreneur, her name is Claudia Hillmeyer, that led her team very differently. She absolutely believes in abundance. She believes in giving. She believes in development of her team as humans. And observing that and being part of that, and to be honest, failing some of that, some hard conversations and candid conversations that she had with me about how I was acting versus what she expected, made me realize that, first of all, there's certain things about my previous corporate life that I was carrying with me that were not serving me. And mainly it's believing in scarcity. And in a consulting company relationship, right, that, you're paying me for doing, I do, I want to make you happy, but, ultimately is a consulting relationship. And I started seeing that was not something that I wanted, that I was proud of, that I really wanted to feel was in it for the purpose, no matter what. And there are good days and bad days, but ultimately that we're in this together. She also exposed me to mindfulness, and I really got deep into that and observing myself, my beliefs, again, beliefs or traumas that I was carrying that were not serving me. And so I came to a point that I really needed to ground myself in who I am and what's my purpose in life. And I went through a time that I studied personal branding, but personal branding is part of discovering really what are your beliefs, what are your fundamental values, I read a book that she gave to me, The Big Leap, and learned about this idea of zone of genius and what's really your genius, and started kind of discovering what really it drove me. At the same time, it was when my youngest son was diagnosed with autism. And my life, the life that I thought I was gonna have, everything was questioned, right? It was questioned about, how I feel. It's not about how I feel. It's about, being here for him and being here in the present, not, 5 years from now, the day I want to become a CEO and all that. It brought me back. So there are a lot of things about believing in abundance, believe in the power in the now, and really ground yourself on who you are. So when this opportunity came at Pharmavite, my biggest thing, and I talked about the hypothesis of bringing a designer, but the true hypothesis, my view is I want to see if I can't build a team in an organization that can achieve success by really being good, focus on the good and the true of the people. And can we focus on not cluttering the mind, not acting from a reactive state, and really focus on, the purpose that we have in a very expensive and creative way. And so I came in with that feeling, and that was I would say the magic of my life that I was discovering and seeing it unfold. When I look back now, I'm still very much grounded in that concept. But what I've learned is how in business, personal and human development is at the core of everything. So I've done a lot more coaching, mentoring, and focus on individual development than I thought I was going to have. So I find great joy in the transformations that I have experienced, but that I have seen within people in the team. Life-changing things, life-changing insights. And this is just incredible. It doesn't happen with everybody, but being part of that in which you share your vulnerabilities, right? Because that's the part of me. And the biggest thing I found is that quote from Oscar Wilde, be yourself, everyone else is taken. That's exactly it. And I realize and feel much more comfortable in my own skin through these experiences, and trust that I'm gonna use my intentions the best that I can do to be there for the people and be candid. Like radical candor, that's something that, we discussed it. I heard, I think the concept from you guys, and, the different types of listening, and I have been able to have really candid and really scary conversations the last 4 years than I've ever had before. And just have known the confidence that I can go there is very powerful.
What's the next evolution that's starting to emerge for you as a leader?
Yeah, I think the challenge that I have in my new role as the president of a business unit is it's a big jump. It's you are acting in the now and in the future. So it's that balance of what's needed right now in this moment for the business results to be there, and balancing all the long-term, I would say, beliefs. So when faced with a challenge, when am I going to be able to let go of control and trust that the organization is going to find a way to deal with that challenge? So that is the question. I'm going to a new organization and I'm meeting people at the stage. But yes, in my leadership circle, my reactive tendency is to drive, right? And so I do want to make sure that as I go into a new organization, that I'm still, keeping line with how I want it to be, and not just fall back into the reactive tendency. So that's really top of mind for me. But at the same time, it's different from working in an innovation organization in which you do have time, meaning you are speeding, but you can pivot and can manage time to one that you have to make a decision. And especially in the space of direct-to-consumer business that we have, your sales are hitting every hour. You can track how you're doing. So it's very in the now and very immediate. And so how am I gonna, learn and adjust to that scenario? So that's what's top of mind for me.
You mentioned that the leadership circle and the reactive, and not wanting to go back into the reactive. And I noticed that if I just try to avoid doing a thing, I'm less successful at it than if I try to move towards a different thing. And so I'm wondering if it could be through the lens of the creative half of the leadership circle, it could be something else. But instead of, there's almost a scarcity of like, don't do this, what's the abundance? What are you trying to lean into that naturally causes you to not go to that driven, reactive stage?
I think it's ultimately getting to know the people and do something really scary sometimes, which is, not be too close to things. Let the people who are closest to it make the decisions, and setting the purpose of where we're going to go. So that's certainly that's my vision, and that's what I learned, that it works for me. It works. It feels good. But when you're learning, when you're getting up to speed where everything is new, is the part that, I need to be a little bit close because I need to learn to understand the business, but I don't want to be too close. That gives the impression that I'm breathing on your neck, that you're still the expert in it. And so so that's something that it's in my mind. It's interesting because in the place, it's very important that I've seen to vocalize on your belief in abundance when you are in that situation. Meaning there is work to go around, and there's growth opportunity for every single person. What I'm trying to do is to understand, first of all, what are the growth opportunities that you want, what your zone of genius is, or what are the opportunities and the growth that you want to do that you haven't done yet, but not feel that, I'm kind of crowding, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear through that lens of the leadership circle, I hear like purposeful and visionary for sure, but then really leaning into caring connection, really leaning into mentoring and developing, collaborating, being selfless and all of that. Like the relationship side of it, the more human side of it, is like the path through. And purposeful and visionary you have no problem with. And it's like in a transition like this, I think we all are at risk of saying, well, just for now I'll be a little driven, right? Because it's a new role and I have to do that in order to be successful. And instead of relying on kind of the newer muscles we've created around, I don't have to be that way to be successful. This human-centric approach works, but it just takes longer because you have to develop relationships. Until you have those relationships, it's not going to be that effective. So it's like, how do you bridge that gap over time, right?
And there is some expectation that people have that you're going to come in day one and you're going to have a vision for the business, that you're going to have an org chart to explain where, what the transformation is. And I need to know at the core of me that I will get to that. I will get to that. We're going to get to that together. Not now. Now it's the time for us to get to know each other and for me to understand, who you are and the culture. How do you guys relate? How do you make decisions? What do you value, right? Because that's so core. I need to make sure that I'm not coming with, hey, I just have a really successful 4 years. I know exactly how it's supposed to be done, because I don't. And so I do talk very, in broad terms. We're here to drive growth, but I had success in the last 4 years in transformation. I'm not there to transform. The business is doing great. I'm here to accelerate growth. So it's a different goal. And I find that is clarifying to people, right? That there's not a major kind of reshuffle that is going to happen that they just want to be aware of. But it's finding the time and finding the grace to myself on knowing that, yes, there are times that people are going to feel uncomfortable, and I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. But if I try to fill in the void and just saying something, I might be getting ahead of myself. So like what's that balance, right? And I'm just finding that, there's certain things about me that I feel really really strongly about to be able to build that connection. So I will bring some of that level of safety differently, not by giving you a vision in an org chart, is by giving you the confidence that you're part of this. You're part of what this future is going to be like. I don't have everything figured out. Every day in a new role is dealing, again, with your own vulnerability and your own imposter syndrome at time. Maybe I should know. Like, no, I don't. It's that conflict and the voices that you try to, this is not helping right now. I'm just gonna be me.
Right back to the mindfulness practice, right?
I'm gonna be me. That's the best that I have.
When you think about your own kids, we've talked a little bit about your son, but that generation, our kids, when they get into the workforce, say a generation from now, what do you hope work looks like for them?
Human. And what I mean by that is kind, that it leverages diversity in every single way to make a difference in the world. And I am really blown away, right? So I have a third grader who's in the public school system, LAUSD, and comes with concepts that I have never thought about when I was at that age. The meaning of things, when you go to work, what does it mean to you? I get those questions when a 9-year-old. What does it mean? Does it mean you don't value me? You're valuing that more? And having those conversations about what's core of who you are, what drives me, what I believe, and what does she believe, and so forth. I do have a lot of hope of having those conversations and having conversations about mental health and mental wellness. That's transformative. I do think that is one of the gifts that we learned in the last couple of years, to be, first of all, to recognize when you're not well and be able to talk about it. But I was talking to my brother the other day, and he is one of the companies that have unlimited PTO. And the issue is that people don't take PTO. Yeah. And so that was the realization. So the company declares holidays. So tomorrow is going to be a holiday. Everybody's out. And we're trying to figure out why, there's so much of that burnout and so much is happening. And I had in this conversation was like, if you're led by people who are not well, they're suffering, they are in the reactive state, what would you expect from organizations? What would you expect? So unfortunately, I think we haven't made, we're not yet looking back to see all the beauty that is going to come out of this period of us having more awareness or experiencing, anxiety, depression, or, but I do see that's a conversation that's happening at schools. How are you feeling? Being able to use words or emojis to talk about your feelings. So I do hope that, when they come to the workforce, that it's one that's much more in touch with, who you are and how you're feeling and the well-being, so that you can be your best self, so that you can make a difference in the world, a positive difference in the world.
So earlier, you very quickly mentioned that you were promoted to be a president of a business unit. Congratulations, we're so happy for you. And I think a lot of us have gone through these transitions in our career where we're promoted or we move into a different role. And I'm curious how you thought about the transition, and what have you done, tactically, what have you done as you got into the role when it was announced? What have you done in the first day, the first week, whatever is useful there?
Yeah, the beginning of it was literally like, is this really happening? So this role did come from a bold declaration to my boss on like, I really want it, and I want you to take a chance on me. And this is scary, but I've been looking for the butterflies in the stomach, and so and through the conversation, he got, you know, he was positive about it. Not only that, got a lot of people behind, supportive of it. So I think the first feeling from me, it was like, oh my God, this is actually happening. And went through a lot of emotions and feelings about that, right? A feeling of, hold on, but I really love what I have right now, you know? You know, it's the time, you know, is it really, really, really the right time? And how is it gonna be? So that was like the moment. And then, you know, and then you start the job, right? Like you start the job before anybody knows about the job, because you start figuring out what are all of the other shifts that are going to happen in the organization. How are you making sure that communication is mindful and respectful, and in the timelines of it, and how we're gonna operate? So you jump right in. So I do think that now, when I'm reading a lot of books about it, it has a lot of like the preparation, the before. And I wish I had read those books right in that moment when it was starting, like, is this really happening? So I do feel like lessons learned, you know, like that was already the time to be studying those things and thinking about those things, because it's not the first 100 days, it's the minus, you know, time that you have from the day of the announcement. So that was a big thing. You know, and I had a conversation with you guys prior to this, and I think that the insight that I got from that is you had the time to get used to that idea. People are going to have the feelings that you had in that first day, which is, this is really happening, right? So make sure that you're not like jumping in and saying kind of, oh, this is me and this is all about me. That's what you should know about me, when it's not about me. I'm just one part of the transition. There are a lot of other transitions that are going to happen. So as I was going down, it's like, how do you make sure, especially in this condition, because the announcement is that the founders, the original founders of this business are leaving at some point. You know, it's great. I have an overlap, a great overlap. But with that, be, you know, really mindful and respectful of that moment of the news that they're leaving, and then therefore I'm coming in. So I do think that I was so mindful that perhaps I didn't share thoughts that I should have shared. And so I left there feeling a little bit, oh, you know, like who am I, right? Who am I? So I did send an email a few days later, just saying, okay, this is probably what you're curious about, who I am. The team used the Slack. I posted a photo of me and my family, you know, this is who I am. So I think it is important. It's like that striking the balance. I don't know what the right balance, but, you know, ultimately you're a human being coming there, and then people want to know who you are. And then the first week, I was still like one leg here, one leg there, because now the team that I was leaving knew I was leaving. So I still had transitions to do. And that's super uncomfortable when you feel like you're nowhere. You're not, you know, really nowhere. When you're transitioning within a job that's an internal job, right? If you come in to a new company, that's not the case. But this is the case. You want to make sure that the people who you're leaving feel respected and taken care of, right? Like right now, it's like, hey, I'm ready to go, you know? So it's that mixed feeling. I did, within the leaders within the organization, we came together and, again, leveraged the tools, you know, put a mural board together and did a lot of the things that I learned a lot from you guys about how to facilitate a session. You know, what is the transition? My eyes of the transitioning. This is what's transitioning. What else is transitioning that I'm not seeing? There were stickies that were added of other transitions in the business that, I'm like, that's a great point, right? How are you feeling about it? How is the team feeling? And how do we, let's talk about those emotions and what do people need to progress, right? Like, let's discuss. And then they provided ideas on certain things that I highlighted the next time I saw the team. And then my 30, 60, 90 days, what do you guys see? What do you want to see? So I can post check where they are. And then we had a highest risk hypothesis exercise. And so that gave me their view. And then also set expectations. Expectations is the name of the game. That's what you're expecting from me. This is what you can expect from me. These are the things I can accomplish, but those things I'm going to push out. So like negotiate on expectations, checking on expectations. I thought that was the most valuable thing. And that, again, it's really core to me. It's not only just go down, lay out what my 90 days plan is going to be allowed, but really build that together.
What's your favorite mistake you've made in the new role?
The mistake is there are people who are ready for candor, but it's not everybody yet. So I do think that I have to make sure that I prime a little bit the people to not get knee-jerk reactions, to like really direct and candid conversation. Not everybody is ready for it. So I think I got, a couple of reactions of just like people like that, and I am like immediately like, ugh, like really, that's not good. I really value that person and so much that person can bring to the table. It's really being more mindful of that I would say that speed of trust, right? The concept of speed of trust. Mm-hmm. I assume perhaps that we are at a step higher level because my intentions are that I see opportunity. But if I don't establish that, it can sound as criticism as the person who just want to shake things up really, really quickly. I feel bad about that. And I think, I sense right away, and you can do what you can to recognize the body language that you get and want to hear more. But again, you're there, you kind of come back from minus state, right? And I wish that was not the case, because I wouldn't want, to have that feeling if I was in that spot.
I hear how seriously you take what you mentioned you want, kindness, and taking care of people, and making sure that people are well. And I know that takes effort, and it's hard. Why is it worth it to you?
I want to be a better person. I want to make people around me better people too. And ultimately, my driven for results, and I like to see our market leadership and all of that, excited about that. But that's not something that happens every day. There needs to be something else that motivates and keeps you going. And I grew up feeling that there was something that needed to be fixed about my presence. I grew up in a situation that, like, I was more driven than people around, right? I was more ambitious than people around me. I grew up in São Paulo, in a neighborhood outside of it, in a family of entrepreneurs. We struggled. They gave everything they could for our education. But, the thoughts of living in a different country, the thoughts of, my dream growing up was I want to be an international executive, that I get to go on planes and see the world and, see different cultures. Is like, what world are you in? It's like so out of, so sometimes I felt it was good, but sometimes it's like I'm just out of touch, right? Like I'm out of touch with people. I'm not grateful and appreciative for what I have because I always want the next thing. And so I grew up thinking about that and kind of having an arrogance to, want something that was outside of reach. So I'm grateful for the support, but that was my journey. So I think coming with that and coming to the realization that it's not a presence that a lot of people want around, right? That I want to make sure that my presence is positive, that the experience of talking to me is positive, that enriches all of us. And again, going back to this entrepreneur that I said, her presence, it was like, it's magnetic. I want to be like that. So it was something that, it was a different way of seeing the world. So for me, the experience of this person who was talking is important to me. Because, that's how we're going to, grow together and, make the world a better place.
Well, we certainly feel that way whenever we interact with you, so kudos on that. And
the same. I couldn't get enough of talking to you guys.
We see it on your team as well. We see the difference you make on your team, and that's what our mission is as well. And so our missions are aligned that way. So thank you for what you've done for your teams and for what you're going to do in the new role, and just for you being you. We love your presence.
Yeah. Thank you. Same.
Thanks for spending this time with us.
Yeah, and I'm forever grateful for that Google, thank you for spending someone on Google search, or that your training went up there so I could have found a lot of other trainers that I realized, and they knock my door now, to want to talk about Agile, but you guys, your presence and your knowledge and your generosity in always sharing and being there and challenging me and kicking my behind when needed, but really believing in me. So I'm like, you guys are never going anywhere.
It's kind of full circle now that you're back to San Diego, because that's where we had that first class.
Oh my gosh, so funny because the day of the announcement, again, I wasn't planning everything, so I don't have a hotel. Like the day before, I need a hotel. So someone here at Pharmavite I'm like, any hotel that's close by, I'm fine. So I didn't even know the name of the hotel. So here I am after all this announcement. I'm driving to the hotel. I'm like, okay, I'm familiar with San Diego, but not super familiar. But I'm driving, okay, I think I've been around this area. And then I pull up in the parking lot. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the very hotel where I met Peter for the training. I'm like,
the courtyard on Hotel Circle.
Courtyard, exactly.
I know the hotel.
And I paused, and I paused in the moment. I was like, wow, I could have never imagined when I went into the training where I would be in 4 years, and I'm just so grateful. But walking in, it was like, oh my God, sometimes you have those what? So that was super cool. Awesome. Anyway.
Thanks, Vivian.
Thank you.
Thank you.